Then I'm going to turn for a moment to her columns on women. She becomes more pragmatic about solutions to female limitations. Now this is interesting. Suffrage for women is not the answer, according to Fuller. However, as Dorothy pointed out, and is absolutely true, her book is inspiration to all of the suffrage leaders to come. But Fuller is saying that the vote is not the answer. She actually is looking for more far-ranging forms than simply being able to vote. In her column entitled "The Wrongs of American Women and the Duty of American Women," which could be a postscript to Woman in the 19th Century, she begins by reviewing the limitations inherent in what is currently called women's proper sphere. She says, girls raised to occupy the domestic sphere, which could be fearful, learn lighter family duties and only enough literature and science to instruct young children. This young woman's youth is spent learning to keep house and use her needle, gaining ornamental accomplishments, and forming manners appropriate to her social circle. So trained, this young woman is not to be a helpmeet or companion or counselor to her husband, except in matters of the household. Were a woman ever to have to earn a livelihood as a widow or single woman, this education would obviously be too limited. And even if she doesn't need to earn her own livelihood, Fuller continues, we would still demand for her a far wider and more generous culture, so that she not thwart the designs of her husband, and so that she might be the respected friend of her sons, no less than her daughters. Give more refinement to her children, polish and plasticity to their characters, and most importantly, save them from vicious and sensual habits. Fuller further reminds her readers that thousands of women cannot have this domestic sphere. They are obliged to maintain themselves, and even numbers of them need to divide with their husbands the care of earning a support for their families. Very realistic. Not counting on a man to support you in your life. A better education and an understanding that women need to earn an independent livelihood. I like that thinking because that's the exact language of John Simmons in his will to found a female college where women will learn to earn an independent livelihood. So Fuller is way ahead of the game. Fuller continues in words reminiscent of Catherine Beecher. We believe the natural order to be the best, but she hopes this is a transition time, the natural order being husband and wife, husband as the wage earner, wife as the manager of the household and the educator of the family. So Fuller hopes that this is a transition time which would lead eventually to an era when better education would develop women's latent talents. But meanwhile, it will be necessary to open more avenues of employment to women. Very practical here. For now, she says, there is sewing, which she hates, by the way. There is factory work, and for farm women, there is growing and selling fruits and vegetables. Domestic service, she predicts, will soon be supplemented by machinery, but will still be women's responsibility. Right about that. A few women may take up arms, she says, but actually women's nature is usually opposed to war. That's quote. Female physicians will be welcomed, and women will continue to share the priesthood, she says. This is in 1845. She says, and this amused me, She says, there will probably not be any female lawyers.
That's not her nature.
I think she'd be shocked by Hillary Clinton. She'd probably be delighted. She concludes, however, that there are two professions for which women are ideally suited and of which there is great need. The first is nursing, and this should become more professional so that women could work not only under the direction of doctors, but with a good education on their own. She's looking forward to the future there, too. And the second profession, not too surprisingly, for which women are ideally suited and greatly appreciated is teaching, especially in the West. In this, she follows the Beecher sisters closely, recommending Cincinnati as a training locale, and Mrs. Stowe and Miss Catherine Beecher, her designations, as the leaders in the field, the ones to teach the teachers. Fuller concludes by confronting the criticism from Harriet Martineau and others that her own Woman in the 19th Century exhibits ills without specifying practical remedies. She answers that her book lays out the principle of superior education and self-development, and this Tribune article proposes the noble and promising work. So finally, in looking at New York, I'm going to talk a little bit about prison reform, which you alluded to from her first visit at Sing Sing. From her arrival in New York, she planned visits. This is investigative journalism that she's introducing. And she often went on these visits with William Henry Channing. She visited prisons, asylums, and orphanages in New York, and the resulting pieces demonstrate her pragmatic calls for action and specific changes in these social institutions. The first major writing on the topic appears in February of 1845, following a visit at the Bloomingdale Asylum for the Insane, a supposedly modern facility supervised by Pliny Earle, a medical doctor specializing in treatment for mental illness. At the Valentine's Day ball, which she attended, she was observing the costumes, the role-playing, the dancing, and the other pleasures of the patients. And she felt that she was seeing proof that Dr. Earle's kinder, gentler treatments were curing his patients. She observes that this treatment is far superior to the medieval non-curative treatments, punitive treatments that were still practiced in most facilities, where mentally ill patients were kept in chains and housed with all kinds of criminals. These are her words. Earle, Dr. Earle, claims to have one attendant for every 7 patients, to give them support, kindness, and individual attention to both their mental and physical health. She's proposing this as a model. Fuller also praises the camisoles, which are straitjackets, which are used to control violent or unruly patients in place of the manacles and chains that she sees when she tours Bellevue in the next month. Fuller echoes Earle in calling for training, specialized training for the attendants, which of course they didn't have at that time. When Fuller toured, there were books and edifying lectures by Earle himself. And Earle claimed that if treatment occurred early enough in the course of a disease, a cure was possible. I don't have time to talk about Dorothy Dix's views on this in 1848, but if you want to, we can talk about it afterwards, because Dix has some rather critical views on this particular institution. In March, for a column on our city charities, Fuller visited Bellevue Almshouse, the Farm School for Children, the Asylum for the Insane, and the Penitentiary on Blackwell's Island.